We want to graph function f of x equals negative logarithm to the base 2 of negative x plus 3 minus 2 using transformations. First, we have to identify the basic function. Since variable x is within logarithm to the base 2 and only appears in this expression, the basic function is logarithm to the base 2 of x. Next, we are looking for the shift left or right. We are looking for changes to the x variable. And we can see that inside the logarithm, we have expression negative x plus 3. That means that the first will perform the shift to the left by 3. So to go from the graph 1 to the graph 2, we need to shift the graph left by 3. Then again we see that there is the coefficient of x in that expression negative x plus 3. That means that we have, since that coefficient is negative 1, we have the reflection about the y-axis. So from graph 2 to graph 3 will reflect about the y-axis. The next change that we can observe in the formula of the function is the minus in front of the whole expression that contains the x, in front of logarithm to the base 2. So putting the minus sign in front of a function means that we'll have to reflect the graph about x-axis. And finally, if you compare formula 4 with our function, we can see that we'll have to subtract from the expression negative logarithm to the base 2 of negative x plus 3 2, and subtracting 2 means we'll have to shift the graph down by 2. So to start graphing, we'll graph the basic function, which is logarithm to the base 2 of x. We'll plot the points. We know the shape of the general shape of that function. As values of x, we choose powers of 2. So we have 1/2, 0, 1, 2, 4. And the powers are negative 1, or values of logarithms, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. We plot those points and we'll graph the basic function. So the point 1/2 of negative 1, 0.1, 0, 2 and 1, 4 and 2. And we could even graph 8 and 3. Remembering that the graph of the logarithmic function has vertical asymptote, which is y-axis, we'll draw the graph of logarithm to the base 2 of x. This is our graph number 1. The second graph we obtain by shifting that graph to the left by 3 units. But this graph has a vertical asymptote. If I move the graph by 3 units, I have to move the graph also by 3 units. So the graph or y-axis moves to 3 units to the left, and therefore the position of new asymptote is now vertical line with the equation x equals negative 3. And each point on the graph 1 is moving to the left by 3. So the point 1/2 of negative 1 is going to move to negative 2.5 negative 1. Point 1 and 0 will move to negative 2 and 0. Point 2 and 1 is going to move to the point negative 1 and 1. 4 and 2 will move to 1 and 2. And point 8 and 3 is going to move to the 5 and 3. And we draw the graph of the logarithmic function going through those points. And this is the graph number 2. The next graph we'll have to do is the graph of the function logarithm to the base 2 of negative x plus 3, which means we take graph 2 and reflect about the y-axis. We also have to reflect the asymptote, so we'll start with that. First, the asymptote now is going to have the equation x equals 3, reflected about the y-axis. And each point on the blue graph is going to be reflected about the y-axis, so we'll get 0.2 and a half and negative 1. We'll get 0.2 and 0. We'll get 0.1 and 1. We'll get negative 1 and 2. And then we'll get negative 5 and 3. And we'll draw the graph going through those points with the line x equals 3 as the vertical asymptote. And this is my graph number 3. The next transformation that we'll have to do is the reflection about the x-axis. We'll be graphing function 4. So if I reflect the asymptote, I still have the same line x equals 3, and each point on the green graph is now reflected about the x-axis. So we'll start with the point negative 5, 3. We'll end up with the point negative 5, negative 3. Point negative 1, 2 will become negative 1, negative 2. Point 1 and 1 becomes 1 and negative 1. Point 2 and 0 stay where it was because it's on the axis of symmetry, and point 2 and a half and negative 1 becomes 2 and a half and 1, and we draw the graph going through those 2 points. Make sure that it's a reflection of the graph number 3. And this is graph number 4. Finally, we need to shift the graph number 4 2 units down. Every point is moving 2 units down. So the point negative 5 and negative 3 becomes negative 5, negative 5. Point negative 1, negative 2 becomes negative 1, negative 4. Point 1, negative 1 becomes point negative 1, negative 3. Point 2, 0 moves to the position 2 and negative 2. And the point 2 and a half and 1 is going to be now at the 2 and a half, negative 1. And we'll draw the shifted graph. And this is the graph 5, the final graph. This is the graph of the function y equals negative logarithm to the base 2 of negative x plus 3 minus 2.